Good day, and welcome to another edition of the Military and Foreign Affairs Network. I am your host, the voice of reason. So, in this episode, I'm going to talk more about the ongoing situation that is occurring inside of Ukraine. So, on my map, you will see the disposition of Russian forces, major maneuver units of the Russian Federation. You will also see major maneuver units of the forces of Novorossiya, the separatist forces that exist inside of eastern Ukraine. This does not show a display of Ukrainian forces on the ground. But first, we are getting more reports of an uptick in fighting that is occurring uh, along the so-called line of demarcation that separates the forces of the separatist Novorossiya region with the Ukraine. And specifically, we're hearing reports that the Ukrainian military is utilizing drones to direct mortar fire, specifically 80 millimeter, 120 millimeter mortar fire against separatist forces. We also continue to see the separatists partake in sniper activity and obviously mortar activity as well. Another issue at hand, there's been two recent events. One not, I believe, as important as another, but first, there was a report approximately 24, 48 hours ago that a Russian helicopter had penetrated Ukrainian airspace briefly and then turned around. That occurred in this area here near Sumy. I don't believe that is a big deal. I believe that happens quite a bit. The border is not well laid out. The helicopters may not be fully relying on GPS navigation systems and could very easily cross the border without realizing it. But more importantly, Russia has moved significant combat assets into the Crimea. Specifically, they have moved major elements of this division here, the 7th Air Assault Division. We have seen major elements of its attached artillery regiment and a regiment of its airborne troops being moved into training areas in the Crimea. And we also know that there is the 171st Separate Air Assault Battalion that is also a component of that airborne division. This unit is to, in fact, become a full-strength regiment at some point. But we understand that there are more than 2,000 additional Russian paratroops that have been moved into the Crimea because of ongoing tensions, we believe, that is taking place inside of the demarcation line between the Ukrainian army and Novorossiya. Each side is stating the other side is preparing for military activity. It would appear that is the case. It would appear the Ukrainian army and military forces are, in fact, preparing to make some sort of move. At the same time, it appears that Russian backed forces are appearing to make additional moves as well. Could that be to counter each other, or they each have a certain military operation in mind? That is hard to say. I do not believe that the status quo will change unless we see a full-scale Ukrainian operation and the Russian armed forces do not decide to intervene more than it's doing so now. So if the Ukrainians were to utilize these new Turkish drones and launch a full-scale operation to seize the eastern breakaway areas, I believe it could do so. However, if the Russians intervene and we see these large maneuver units of the Russian Federation actually fully enter the eastern Ukraine, well, that of course would then create a stalemate. At the same time, I do not believe the Russian military will make a generalized move into eastern Ukraine. I believe the force disposition, the force posturing would have to be much higher than its current level. We would need to see movements of other forces from around Russia being moved into the area. Could that be happening and us not realize it is happening? Possibly, but doubtful. I believe these heavy units near Moscow, the 1st Tank Army, would need to be moved into place um, because of the increase in quality of the Ukrainian military that really occurred, I would say, from 2018 until present time. If the Russians had wanted to move into Ukraine, it should have done so in that 2014, 15, 16 time frame. But since then, the quality of the Ukrainian armed forces is to a degree now that only a large scale mobilization of Russian forces, to include reserve components, could possibly seek to conquer the Ukraine fully. It could launch operations to take smaller pieces of Ukraine, but a operation to say to move towards Kiev, or even a move to fully seize control of Kharkiv would be extremely challenging for the current disposition of forces by the Russian Federation. This is not the same Ukrainian army the Russians tangled with in 2014, 15, 16. This is a much different force. This is a much better organized force. It's a much more better trained force than what we saw in 2014, 15, 16.